Welcome to our channel Elimika Mtandaoni. My name is Agustino Okosi. In today's video, we will talk about operating system. We get to understand what is operating system. So we will know the meaning of operating system, and we'll end up discussing about the functions, the principal functions of operating system. So let us start. Speaking of the word operating system, before going to that, let me my white screen. So think of this as your computer, and this being your computer is made up of two parts, as we have said, the hardware part and the software part. Now, when we talk about operating system, our focus will be on the software part. But before that, let us talk about the hardware parts. We say that hardware, from the previous videos that we talked about the computers, we said that the hardware is a tangible part of a computer, all those parts of the computer that you can see and touch. And you need to take a note that a hardware cannot do anything by itself, because it needs to be instructed, it needs to be commanded. And the thing that commands or instruct the hardware to do whatever it does, then that is called a software. Software actually is a set of instructions. We say set of instructions, or we can say is a set of commands that tell the hardware what to do. So it means that the hardware by itself cannot do anything unless it is instructed. So the hardware parts, we have the hardware parts of a computer that are responsible for inputting data into the computer. There are some hardware parts that are responsible for processing the data that is entered into the computer. There are some hardware parts that are responsible for storing data into the computer, and some hardware parts of the computer that are responsible for outputting what we call information. So these we call input devices. These ones here we call processing devices. These ones here we call storing devices, and output devices. These are hardware parts. So they need to be instructed. They need to be told what to do. And in fact, as we are talking of this, if we go back to our computer, as we have said, this is our computer, then our computer has got about 4 basic operations. That means there are those operations that are responsible for inputting data into the computer. Suppose you are inputting 1, you are inputting 2, you are inputting A, you are inputting an image, or you are inputting a symbol, etc. It goes into the computer. So this kind of operation of inputting data into the computer, this operation is called input operation. And once data enters into the computer, it is again processed. It is processed. So we have processing operations of a computer. So the data enters into the computer to be processed. Then some of the data, before being processed, it is then stored. So the operation that is responsible for storing data, we can say this is storing operations. And after the data has been processed, it gives out what we call information. The operation responsible for outputting information outside from the computer, that is called the output operations. So all these operations, the input operation, the processing operation, the storing operation, and output operations, are done by the hardware parts of the computer. But as we have said, that the hardware part of the computer cannot do anything unless it is instructed by the software. Now, what is that software that we are talking about? The software that we are talking about is, now we can go to our definition of operating system. Before going that, the software is divided into 2 types. Speaking of a software, we have 2 types of software. One is what we call a system software, and the second one is what we call application software. Now, under the system software, we have a number of software, a number of types. Among them, we have one that is called operating system. There's one we call operating system. We have another one that is called the language translators. We have other that we call utility programs. Now our focus will be on the operating system. We need to understand what is operating system. So let us proceed. As we have talked about these basic operations of a computer, that's what we have talked about. Now, what is operating system? Operating system is in fact a master system of programs. It's a master system of programs that aims, or whose aim or purpose is to manage the basic operations of a computer. That means the act of inputting data into the computer, the act of processing data within the computer, storing that data, and outputting information is done with the help of this, what we call an operating system. It is the program that manages all the basic operations of a computer. And we also call it a software platform. The other name for operating system is what we call a software platform. And it consists of master system of programs that aim or manage the basic operations of a computer. Now, these programs, they provide resource management services of many kinds. In particular, they handle the control and use of hardware resources, including the disk space, memory, the CPU time allocation, and peripheral devices. The operating system, what it does, it allows you to concentrate on your own tasks or applications rather than the complexities of managing the computer. So if you want to write something on a Microsoft Word, you don't have to bother of how to locate it. You don't have to bother about the space that will be required to save it, or the memory that is needed to load the Microsoft Word for it to operate. So you leave all the complexities, all the hard parts of the computer to be managed by this, what we call operating system. Different sizes and makes of computers have their own operating systems that you have to take a note of. Say different sizes and makes of computers have their own operating systems. For example, you can talk of a desktop computer. You can talk of a mainframe computer. You can talk of a mini computer. You can talk about handheld computers like the mobile phones, etc. All these different computers with different sizes and different makes have their own operating systems. And as we have said, pen-based computers, for example, have their own operating system. PenWrite, PenPoint, Windows for pen computing that enable users to write scribbles and notes on the screen. In general, an operating system written for one kind of hardware will not be able to run on another kind of machine. In other words, we can say different operating systems are mutually incompatible. This means that if you have an operating system, let's say Windows operating system, we have, let's say, Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, now we have Windows 11. All these are different kinds of operating systems. These are made to run on PC computers. They're made to run on PC computers. And they cannot be compatible. They cannot run on a computer that is made to run, let's say, Apple OS, iOS, for example. Okay, so you have, let's say, Apple computers. They are different machines from other PCs. So the operating system that is made to run on Apple computers are not run on PC computers. The same with the handheld devices. For example, these what we call mobile phones. You can have what we call Android mobile phones. When we say Android mobile phones, means that the mobile phones that they are installed with the Android operating system. We can have Windows phones. We have Windows phones, and we can have iOS phones. These are like iPhones, etc. Apple products. So an operating system that is made to run on Android phone cannot run on Windows phone, can also not run on iOS phone. Microcomputers users may readily experience the aggravation of such incompatibility when they acquire a new or use the microcomputers. Do you get an Apple Macintosh with the Macintosh system software which always run on PC programs? Is it possible to have Macintosh system software to run on PC programs? Or do you get a PC, for example, a Compaq or a Dell that can run Macintosh program? It is not possible. So the different operating systems are mutually incompatible. Now let us proceed with our video. Now let us discuss about the operating system's functions. Before we try to sort out these perplexities that we have talked about, we should have an idea of what operating system do. Now we will consider the following. We will consider booting. We'll consider booting. Let me take a pen here. We'll consider booting. Okay, let's change the pen now. Oh, there is a change of pen. Let's take the pen here. Okay, so and we'll consider booting. That is the first basic function of operating system. We'll also consider user interface as another function of operating system. CPU management, file management, task management, formatting, and lastly, we'll talk about security management. Now, let us talk about booting. Let us talk about booting. What is booting? One among the works of operating systems or the functions of operating system is what we call booting. The work of the operating system begins as soon as you turn on your computer. If you switch on your computer, then, or we can say, as soon as you boot your computer. You see, we have used the word boot. So what is booting, by the way? When we say booting is the process of loading an operating system into the computer's main memory. That means for a computer to say that it is booting or it is turning on, it means that you load instructions, systems, software instructions, that is the operating system. You load it into the main memory. We call it random access memory. This loading is accomplished by programs that are stored permanently on a computer's electronic circuitry. So when you turn on the machine, there are some programs that are called the diagnostic routines. They are called the diagnostic routines. As their name suggests, diagnostic routines, what they do, they test first the main memory, and they test the central processing unit and other parts of the system to make sure that they are running properly. So before the computer starts, you will find that there is a delay, some few seconds delay. That means there is what we call a test, where we test for these parts of a computer, and specifically we test for random access memory, that is the main memory, and the CPU and other parts of the computer. The aim is to make sure that these parts of a computer run properly. So that is one step during booting. So we first test these parts of a computer. And the parts of the computers that are tested, as we have said, the CPU, the random access memory, and other parts of a computer. Now, what's the next step during booting? The next step in booting is what we call BIOS. BIOS means that this BIOS stands for Basic Input-Output System programs. These basic output input systems are then copied into the main memory to help the computer interpret the keyboard characters or transmit characters to the display screen or the storage device. So these then you copy the basic input output so that the keyboard can work and other input devices can also work. Then what is the next step? The next step is then the boot programs obtains the operating system from the hard disk. So now you take the operating system from the hard disk, because the operating system is installed in the hard disk, then it loads it into computer's main memory. So these are the steps. First you test, the second one, then you copy this basic input output so that the input devices can work. Then you take the operating system and load it into the there you have finished the process of booting. So the booting is of 3 steps: testing, BIOS, copying into the computer main memory, then you load the operating system. Now, after the 3 steps of booting, as we have said, booting has 3 steps. The first step is about testing, the second one is when we talk about BIOS, and the third one is you load the operating system into the main memory. Now, booting is of 2 types. So speaking of types of booting, we have what we call cold boot, and another one is what we call warm boot. So speaking of booting, we talk of booting in 2 types. The one that is called the cold boot happens when you power up a computer by turning on the power switch. So the time the computer that was shut down, once you press the power up button, that is called the cold boot. If your computer is already on and you restart it, this is called the warm boot or a warm start. So you do that, and those are the 2 types of booting. So among the functions of operating system, as we have said, the first one is booting. Now we will proceed to the next function of user interface. This is the second function of operating system. The first thing you see after your computer finishes booting, so operating system follows after booting, the user interface follows after booting. But first thing that you see after your computer finishes booting is what we call user interface. Actually, the user interface is the user controllable display screen that allows you to communicate or interact with your computer. So in the user interface, you will find either a display screen that is a black screen. You can find a black screen, or you can find a screen with the icons and pictures, etc., etc. This black screen, if you find, it will have an insert blinking type of a cursor that will request you to write commands. So we have different kinds of interfaces. This kind of interface with the black screen allows you to command the computer through different commands. We call it command line interface. We call it command line interface. This is command line interface. But in some computers, most of the computers nowadays, because nobody wants to get troubles, all the computers have icons and some pictures that instruct you on what to do. So that kind of interface, we call it graphic user interface. We call it graphic user interface. And today's most popular user interfaces, most computers use this graphic user interface that allows you to use a mouse or a keystroke to select icons. Icons are small pictorial figures and commands for menu lists and other activities. So that is another function of operating system to allow you to communicate or interact with your computer. It allows you to interact with it through commands. If it allows you to interact through commands, then you will have an interface that is called command line interface. But if it uses icons or symbols, we call it graphics user interface. This we call it GUI, GUI, and this is CLI, command line interface. Now let us proceed with another function of operating system, function number 3, which is CPU management. This is another function of operating system that is called the CPU management. Like a police officer that directs traffic, the supervisor or the kernel from the CPU, what it does, it manages CPU. Remember, CPU is a part of a computer that is for processing. CPU stands for central processing unit. So this operating system, it remains in the main memory while the computer is running, and directs other non-resident programs that are not in the main memory to perform tasks that support application programs. Thus, if you enter a command, for example, to print a document, what the operating system does, the operating system will select a printer if there are more than one printers. So it will help you to select a printer. It will then notify the computer to begin executing instructions from the appropriate program known as the printer driver, because it controls or it drives that printer. So meanwhile, many operating systems allow you to continue writing where you do other activities, or when it is printing, then you can be writing or you can be listening to music. So all that management of what the CPU does, the CPU may do one thing and allows you to concentrate on another thing. That is the management of the CPU. So the operating system also manages memory. It keeps track of the locations within a main memory where programs and data are stored. It can swap portions of data and programs between main memory and secondary storage, for example, your computer hard disk. This capability allows a computer to hold only the most immediately needed data and programs within the main memory, yet it has ready access to programs and data on the hard disk, thereby greatly expanding memory capacity. Now, what ways does operating system manage memory? Let us talk about that. There are about 3 ways that the operating system manages memory. The first one is through partitioning. We call it partitioning. That is one way that the operating system can manage memory. The second way is foreground slash background. And another one is through queues. Now let us discuss these one after another, starting with the partitioning. In partitioning, the operating system divides memory into separate areas called partitions. Suppose this is your memory, then it divides your memory into what we call partitions, each of which can hold a program or a data. For example, you are giving your computer to add 2 numbers. Let's say 2 plus 3. Those are the 2 numbers. What the computer can do in that case, it can do what we call partitioning. How to manage the memory? It will first partition these memories into about 3 partitions. Maybe it will give it addresses. Suppose this is address X, this is address Y, and this is address Z, for example. So if you give it a number, let's say 2, it takes this 2 and places it in the first partition. Then it takes another number and puts it in the second partition. So here we will have 2, here we will have 3. So during addition, it will take the numbers. Suppose it takes this 2, then it will take 2 and add it with the 3, gets the answer, that is 5. Then we will take the answer and put it in another partition. Maybe you call it Z or etc. So partitioning, it means that the operating system divides the memory or separates the memory into a number of partitions, of which each of those partitions can hold data or can hold programs, so long as that operating system runs. Another way is through foreground slash background. Some computer systems divide memory into foreground and background areas. That means the foreground programs have higher priorities. The foreground programs are the ones that you see or you are interacting now currently. As you are opening your computer, the programs that you have opened and you are working on them, those are given high priority. But there may be some other programs that may be running on the background. Those are given lower priority. So when you are working at your microcomputer, the foreground programs I have said is the one that you are currently working with. For example, you are working with a word processing program. You have opened your Microsoft Word, suppose, and you are working on it. That will be called a foreground program. But the background program might be regulating the flow of printing image to your printer. For example, as you are writing, you are again printing. Then that is what we call a background. Another way that operating system manages memory, it is through queues. It is through queues. Programs that are to be executed wait on a disk in queues. A queue actually is a temporary holding place for programs or data. That means you can have a temporary store like this. Once the data is to be processed, before processing occurs, then this is first made to wait in a certain storage program, in a certain store before it is being processed. So if processing occurs in here, then the ones that are to be processed will be taken in a queue. So a queue is actually a temporary holding place for programs or data, and it is actually the disk area. And this disk area where the programs and documents wait, this disk area is what we call buffer. So as you have seen, this can be observed in a printing job. Printing jobs, we call them printing jobs. They have a name called spool. Okay? These printing jobs are normally spooled. What they do is, we have said, print jobs are usually spooled. That is, they are placed in what we call in a buffer. In a buffer, here they wait in a queue to be printed. So if you command print, for example, you are printing a number of documents, it is possible for you, after you have clicked the button print, it is possible for you to even detach the wire that connects your computer with the printer, because after you have clicked the word print, after you have clicked the button print, the printing jobs become spooled. That means they are put in a queue that wait to be printed. This happens because the computer can send printing jobs to the printer faster than the printer can print them. So the jobs must be stored and then passed to the printer at a rate it can handle. Once the CPU has passed a print job to the buffer, it can take on the next processing task. Another CPU operating system function is what we call file management. File management. That is another operating system function. Let us first understand what's a file. Speaking of the word file, a file is actually a named collection of related information. Let me write here, named collection of related information. A file is nothing, can be a program. A program is just a file. A program, for example, a program like Microsoft Word, VLC, Media, or it can be, a file can also be data. A file can be data. For example, the word processing document, after you have created your document, the word processing document, or a spreadsheet, or an image, or a song in your computer is also called a file. So we have more discussion about files in other videos, but let us proceed with file management. Files actually contain programs and data, and they are located in many places on your hard disk or other secondary storage devices. So what the operating system does, the operating system records the storage location of all your files. So if you are storing your file, let's say in your hard disk, you are storing your files in your hard disk, then it is the role of the operating system to know where exactly should that file be located. So if it happens that you move this file from one place in your hard disk to another place, or you rename it, or you delete that file, the operating system also manages such changes and will help you to locate and gain access to it. For example, you can copy or duplicate files in programs from one disk to another. You can do what we call backup, or you can make a duplicate copy of the contents of a disk. You can erase, you can remove from a disk any files or programs that are no longer useful. You can rename or give new files, names to files on a disk. So that is another role of operating system. Another important task of operating system is task management. We move task management. A computer is required to perform many different tasks at once. In word processing, for example, it accepts input data, it stores the data on a disk, and it prints out the document that is outputting, and it does that seemingly simultaneously. So some computers' operating system can also handle more than one program at the same time. So you can hear within the same computer, you can be opening here Microsoft Word. At the same time, you are listening to music. Another time, there is something going on the background. Others can also accommodate the needs of several different users at the same time. So different users can be accessing the same computer at the same time. All these examples that I have given you illustrate what we call task management. So what is a task? A task actually is an operation. For example, storing, that's an operation. Printing, that's an operation. Calculating, that's an operation. There are a lot of operations. Among the ways that operating system manage tasks in order to run more efficiently, among the ways, one is what we call multitasking. So that is one way the manages tasks through multitasking. Another way, it is through multiprogramming. Another way, it is through time sharing. And lastly, it is through multiprocessing. Multiprocessing. This is, speaking of multiprocessing, that is simultaneous processing of two or more programs by multiple computers. Multiprocessing is the processing that is done by two or more computers or two or more processors that are actually linked together to perform the work simultaneously. That is at precisely the same time. This can entail processing instructions from different programs or different instructions within the same program at once. As in multitasking, which involves only a single processor, the processing should be so fast that by spending a little bit of time working on each program in turn, several programs can be run at the same time. With both multitasking and multiprocessing, the operating system keeps track of status of each program so that it knows where it left off and where to continue processing. But an operating system capable of multiprocessing is much more sophisticated than that required for multitasking. So there are some approaches where multiprocessing, co-processing, and parallel processing. These are two approaches where you can do multiprocessing. One is called the co-processing. Second one is parallel processing. Those are two ways that you can do multiprocessing. So what is co-processing? In co-processing, the controlling of CPU works together with the specialized microprocessors that are called co-processors, each of which handles a particular task. For example, such as creating a display screen graphics, or performing high-speed mathematical calculation. So many microcomputers have these capabilities of core processing. You may find that you have a computer with a number of cores of processing. But speaking of parallel processing, several full-fledged processors work together on the same tasks, sharing memory, etc. Parallel processing is often used in large computers designed to keep running if one of the CPU fails. These are called fault-tolerant systems. So in multiprocessing is done in two ways, and one way is core processing and another one is parallel processing. Now let us move to another function of operating system that is called formatting. Let us proceed to formatting. Formatting, in other words, we can say initializing. A disk in your computer needs to be initialized or needs to be prepared. So speaking of formatting or initialization or initializing, this is a disk is being prepared so that it can store data or it can store programs. Nowadays, we have many of the disks that come with to us as we use, for example, the hard disk, the flash disk, and so many other disks. They come to us, they are pre-formatted. But before, back in the days, before using any disk, you had to prepare it. You had to initialize it to make it able to store data. And the process of formatting is also done during installation of operating system. Before putting your information system into your local disk, it needs first to be prepared. It needs first to be initialized. And that is done by the operating system, which is called formatting. Another last task of operating system that we are going to discuss is security management. Operating system is also responsible for the management of security. Operating systems allow users to control access to their computers. This is especially important when several people use one computer, when on a network in which various people use one system. So users gain access in the same manner as accessing their emails via a username and a password. So that control is done using a computer. So if you are using a computer to work, you may be assigned a password. When you first boot up a new computer, you may also be required to input your username and your password to ensure that you are securing your machine. There are some other management of security within a computer, as we have said. To log in into your OS, you need to input your username and your password. That is to ensure security. We have been through quite a journey on what is operating system. We have discussed what is operating system and principles of operating system. In short, we have talked about the functions of operating system, that is booting, user interface, CPU management, file management, task management, formatting, and security management. Now, let us ask ourselves a number of questions. For example, if you are supposed, let's say, to describe what is operating system, will you be able to describe? Explain the important features of operating system. For example, explain about booting, explain about CPU management, explain about file management, task management, formatting, and security management. Will you be able to explain that? So that is the end of the video about operating system. My name is Agustino Mogosi, and this is Elimika Mtandao.